Not only am I going to show you a deck that can turn a Cultivate into a win con, but I'm going to show you a deck that can take someone out of the game on turn 4. Obviously off of the thumbnail, you know that our commander is Tifa Lockhart from Final Fantasy, a commander that simply doubles its power every time a land enters the battlefield under our control. A card that is extremely easy to go off of, so let's do our best to keep Tifa as strong as possible while staying on a budget of $50 for our 99, excluding Tifa and our lands in the budget. And so for starters, we aren't going to be able to include staples like 3 visits since the price of those cards have jumped to around $9 due to lack of reprints. What we can't include is suboptimal ramp cards because simply in this deck they aren't suboptimal. Any 3 to 4 mana ramp spell that lets us grab 2 to 3 lands and put them onto the battlefield are what this deck runs on. And while most only search for 2 lands and have them enter tapped, our MVP cards are like Skyshroud Claim, which will have 2 lands that we search for enter untapped, and End's Restoration, which if we can get Tifa to 4 power before casting it, we can then search for 3 lands and put them onto the battlefield, which would in turn double Tifa's power 3 times. So now we have down how Skyshroud Claim and cards like it are MVP cards because of it allowing lands to enter untapped so that we can cast other extra ramp spells to boost Tifa's power. And then any card that puts 3 lands directly onto the battlefield, tapped or untapped, can be considered a win con for us, being able to double Tifa's power 3 times. Okay, so now that I've quickly gone over the obvious part of the deck, being able to ramp out of our asses, let's get into the nitty gritty of this budget deck and get to the cards that help boost us to a turn 4 kill on a budget. First and foremost, let's talk about what not to include before what to include. Mandadorkson, any card that ramps us without being land ramp is not what we want for this deck. Tifa is a lands matter deck over a normal ramp deck. What that means is we don't actually care about having a lot of mana, what we care about is having a bunch of lands enter the battlefield. The extra mana is just a extra bonus of the deck. Birds of Paradise, Fertile Ground are both ramp cards that are good but don't net us lands, and in the end would be a waste of our budget. So anything not to do with land ramp is getting left on the chopping block for this budget deck. Now let's get into the actual meat of what's in the deck. The deck has 38 lands and 26 sources of ramp, which I'm also including being able to play an extra land for turn from our hand. So around 65% of this deck is lands and ramp, which is pretty self-explanatory. So what are we doing besides ramping with Tifa? The answer is buffing her up in the source of buff spells and +1/+1 counters. The reason for this is that the issue with Tifa on a budget is that we won't reliably be able to play extra lands on our turns with cards like Exploration and Azusa, so making Tifa as big of a base as possible before we start ramping is a big win con for us. So cheap cards like Snakeskin Veil that put a +1/+1 counter on Tifa will make it so we don't need to ramp as hard to get Tifa Commander lethal on someone. Let's just take a card like Cyto Burst for example, which we could cast to make Tifa go from a 1/2 to a 6/7. All we would have to do after that is play a land for turn, doubling Tifa's powers to 12, and then cast 1 ramp spell to at least get 1 other land to enter the battlefield, doubling her power from 12 to 24, making it commander lethal on someone. And the best part is that this can be reasonably done on turn 4 in this budget deck. And we can also do this with a variety of different spells. Scale Up, Hunter's Prowess, and Blossoming Defense, where we can cast these spells before ramping and playing our land for turn to get a bigger base power to double to go in for the kill with Tifa. The benefit of these cards is that they give a big temporary power boost for Tifa for not a lot of mana, but it does go away at the end of turn. But another way that we can increase Tifa's base power and toughness is through +1/+1 counters, which have the benefit of not going away at the end of our turn. A bulk card like Snakeskin Veil doubles as protection, giving Tifa hexproof, but also gives Tifa a +1/+1 counter that will stay on her for as long as she is alive, making it so where we double her power from 1 to 2 without ever having to play a land. Ride the Shoe Poof lets us put a +1/+1 counter onto Tifa whenever a land enters, which basically every land that we play, we can first put a +1/+1 counter onto Tifa and then double her power, once again letting us get her power as high as possible without needing to ramp as hard. The last way that we're going to be boosting Tifa is through auras and equipments. Lion and Snake Umbra are both great stat boosts that give good keywords and card draw as a bonus. Well Rested is going to let us put 2 +1/+1 counters onto Tifa every time she untaps, building up a lot of value after only even 2 turns of it going off. Adventuring Gear and Skyclave Pickaxe both give the effect of giving Tifa +2/+2 whenever a land enters under our control, which again we can snack like off of Ride the Shoe Poof, where once a land enters we first give her the +2/+2 and then double her power, making it to where we also don't have to ramp as hard. And now the best type of auras and equipments that we can put onto Tifa are the ones that give +X for each forest we control. In a deck that consists of mostly basic forest, a card like Blanchwood Armor is basically going to give Tifa a major power boost for as long as she is alive. Most of the time, Tifa is just going to be getting +X for every land that we control. So if we have 7 lands on turn 4, she goes from a 1/2 to a 8/9. And now my absolute favorite card in this deck is going to be Staff of Titania. The staff gives Tifa the effect of +X, where X is the number of forest that we control, and off of attacking, we can make a 1/1 green forest dryad land creature token. So not only does this token that we are attacking count as a forest, but also since it's a land, it will also trigger Tifa's ability, letting us double her power one more time as we swing. And so our game plan in this budget deck is simple. First turn is almost always going to be a forest and then pass, and then of course maybe if we get lucky, have a turn 1 Soul Ring. Then we cast Tifa turn 2, setting up for a big turn 3. Turn 3 is where we have a few options. We can do something like cast a buff spell or a equipment like Blossoming Defense or Adventuring Gear, and then play our land for turn and hopefully ramp into one more piece, getting Tifa around 12 to 15 power. This means that in a turn 4, we can play a land for turn and ramp once to get commander lethal on any one player. Of course, this strength also takes us to one of our deck's big weaknesses, 1 being card draw and 2 being running out of steam. Tifa getting removed slows down this deck a lot, and on a budget we don't have too many options of protecting her. The same goes for card draw, as on a budget once again, we don't have a lot of options whenever it comes to refilling our hand. But this Tifa's deck's biggest strength is just smashing someone's face and doing it extremely quickly. We buff up Tifa, get some ramp, and this budget deck will be stomping your pod before they even have a chance to think.